So again, it's so good to be here and to be with you. I'm just kind of amazed at how moved I am to see you all. I want to talk today about practice and how occasionally in our practice and in life, we touch something very deep. And when we touch it, it clears it entirely. Or we have some strong realization. But more often in the day-to-day practice, we have to touch difficult places again and again and again. And these are the kalishas in Pali, the causes of suffering. Craving, aversion, and ignorance are greed, hatred, and delusion. And they are things that keep us from being present, from being wakeful, from being alive in us. So we've worked with anger maybe, and the unpleasantness of it makes us really motivated to work with it. So we know that when we throw our anger out, we may get an experience or a moment, just a hit of satisfaction. Got him. But once the expression is over and the consequences come, it's not so good. So we see this, and we have some motivation to look deeper and to work with it. And noticing that anger is present is the first step to moving out of it. So we have to learn to recognize these forces and not just to act on them when they come up. And freedom means giving really radical permission for all of our emotions to sweep through us and not to suppress anything. We have to learn to recognize these shadowy feelings. They're like sheep that are dressed in wolves' clothing. And it's the most difficult thing that there is, just to let things be as they are. To learn how to let all our thoughts and emotions flow through. And in anger and hatred, we can also feel that our hearts are closed, and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to anybody. It feels painful. So again and again, as many times as it comes up, hundreds, thousands, we turn in with non-judgmental awareness to our direct experience. When greed or craving arise, it's much more subtle. It's actually also unpleasant, but we're so focused on the object and on getting the object that we're completely launched into the future. There's a cute little cartoon that I saw of a little girl, and in the first frame, she says, she's really cute. She says, "I saw it." And in the next frame, she says, "I wanted it." In the next frame, the third frame, she says, "I threw a fit." And in the last frame, she's smiling and she says, "I got it." So the immediate results of acting on craving gives us a much more socially acceptable hit than acting on anger. But it also pulls us out of presence and into the future. And if we're even just a little bit sensitive, we can feel that we're cut off. We're cut off from ourselves. And something is out of sorts. Our hearts are closed. Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, a teacher from India whose followers called him Osho, said, "Greed simply means you're feeling a deep emptiness and you want to fill it with anything possible. It doesn't matter what it is." And once you understand this or experience it or touch it, the inner emptiness disappears. And with it, all greed disappears. So these unconscious tendencies are really strong and they go deep, 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 deep into our psyches. And the tendencies get more and more subtle as our practice grows. And each time we have to meet and get to know these currents that move through us. And we need to get to know them on all levels and in all the different forms. Because the difficulties will continue to arise. And each and every time we have to meet them fresh. We have to meet them new in each moment, acknowledge them, and bow to them. So, along with greed and anger, there's also this pull in us to unconsciousness, to just check out. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today. In ignorance. It's called avidya in Pali, or delusion. It's hard to recognize ignorance when it's happening because we're off somewhere, we're disassociated at the time. So in this way, it's pretty strange, but it does keep us from being present. And when we recognize it, it begins to loosen its hold on us or even disappears entirely. So I want for each one of us to name and acknowledge that we have this longing for unconsciousness. It's a pull that we all have to go into trance, into the story of our lives, and to go numb. It's pervasive and it's deep. And we need to honor it. We need to name it and bow to it the same way we bow to greed or to anger. This falling into unconsciousness or ignorance or delusion, and it can actually be a choice. I remember I was on a long retreat once. It was, I don't know, a month long or something. And I was sitting and I was bored. And then I caught myself wishing I would just fall asleep so the time would move more quickly. Because it's a good way to be with boredom that was unpleasant at the time. It's tricky. The Buddha spoke at length about greed and hatred and delusion, and none of us escape getting caught in any of these. Also, and not in ignorance. A story I told just recently, when I was young, I would go to the movies and buy this little box of popcorn. You could buy popcorn or candy bar, and I'd always get the popcorn. And as I grew older, the boxes of popcorn got bigger, more expensive and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, until there was these enormous, enormous tubs of popcorn. And I loved it because I loved popcorn and I would eat it way past when I was full. But more than the popcorn, I loved going unconscious eating it. I could get lost in the movie and lost in the popcorn, and it was wonderful. My stomach felt terrible. Terrible. But my hand was always reaching into the bucket and putting more popcorn into my mouth. So unconsciousness, delusion, and ignoring. And it's not really ignorance that's the problem, but our ignorance of ignorance is what is holding us back. Our ignorance of our ignorance. Now, in the Western world, we have too much tension. And just going unconscious into relaxation can bring a lot of relief. And it seems like a good thing. It can be helpful as an antidote to this fast paced life that we're living in. And it is healthier than tension or stress. But relaxation is not the goal. In fact, it's far from the final step. It's the opposite of overtension, but it's not what we're searching for. What we're really longing for is an experience of being alive, this vitality, and this feeling of wakefulness and presence. We've touched it and we know it. One of my teachers, Charlotte Selva, she never let us use the word relax. She didn't like it because we kind of equate relaxation with collapsing into an easy chair, turning on the television, and having a beer in our hand. And we need other words in English, liveliness, vitality, wakeful presence, or resting, but alert. And there's a healthy tension in it. So we need to acknowledge this strong tendency in each one of us towards mindlessness. It's not bad, it's in every one of us. The lack of attention, the lack of consciousness. It's a habit of mind. It's a habit of mind and the nature of mind not to focus, not to stay still. And it's aggravated by the world we live in. We don't want to remember the bigger picture. We don't want to remember the picture of life and death and that change is inevitable. There's a joke. What's the difference between ignorance and apathy? I don't know, and I don't care. So let's look at unconsciousness. It's not just a bad thing. It may even be necessary. There's a positive side of it. It might be necessary for integration. And we go to sleep at night. We go unconscious. We need rest. Actually, on longer retreats, the deeper we get into meditation, the less we need to sleep. And we need to sleep much less because we're integrating as we go along. In fields of somatics, our sensory awareness is one of them. We feel places in us, and all of a sudden we're surprised because we feel some places numb. A numb feeling in our thigh or our shoulder. And this is the first step of waking up, noticing the numbness in us. It's a normal reaction to too much pain, physical or mental. We shut down. Numbness is an intelligent organismic coping mechanism. And if showing up emotionally is painful, we stop showing up. It's the good fairy that comes to us and deadens us. We deaden ourselves to what's happening because it helps us survive. We keep our eyes closed as an act of survival. And we deaden ourselves to what's actually happening to the oceans and to our planet and to the air because it's too painful to bear. Oh my God. We have to deaden our sensitivity because it's so painful to see what people do to each other, what we do to creatures, what we do to the earth, to the water. We'd rather numb ourselves than feel the grief of what's happening. So, what is your favorite way of going unconscious without judgment? Watching TV, drinking alcohol, reading novels. What is your favorite way of going unconscious? Screens are a wonderful way of going unconscious. Perhaps can you experience your avoidance as a skillful survival mechanism that you needed and maybe still need, but possibly can begin to name it. So the Buddha said, a fool who recognizes his own ignorance is thereby, in fact, a wise man. But a fool who considers himself wise, that is what one really calls a fool. And the Dalai Lama said, in Buddhism, ignorance as the root cause of suffering refers to a fundamental misperception of the true nature of the self and all phenomena. May our hearts be at ease with the changing conditions of life. May our practice bear the fruit of wisdom and lead us to freedom. So I'd like to make an announcement that I'll be leading a 6 weeks on-site course that will meet most of Sundays starting May 28th, meditation and sensory awareness. And if you're interested in more information or to sign up, please go to my website, www.terryray.org. So perhaps we can unmute and say hi to our friends and goodbye.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Sangha.
Glad to have you back.
Yeah,
you,
welcome
Terry.
back, Terry.
Nice
Thank
to see
you.
you again.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Sangha.
Sangha.
Welcome back, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. Welcome home.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Sangha.
Thank
Great
you,
message.
Sangha.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Sangha.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Sangha.
Great to have
Be,
you back.
be well, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank
Happy
you.
May.
Happy May.
Thank you, Sangha.
Thank you.